So welcome everyone to this edition of ROV Meditation Practice Tips. And today, Stephen and I continue our series on reducing anxiety. Today, we're going to talk about and guide a short practice in how to strip anxiety of its power. So just to reestablish the way we're framing anxiety, we feel anxiety when we're looking at a situation and it feels really big and challenging and overwhelming to us. And we look at our own resources that we have to handle that situation and they feel small. So we feel like that's big and here what I have is small, and so I feel anxious about this situation. So today we're going to talk about how step 6 of the ROV meditation process, reflection and insight, can be applied to anxious situations to take their power away, take that anxiety that grips us and just dissolve it so it feels like a really manageable situation. So Stephen's going to start by sharing a story or two about how we're looking at anxiety and how we can shift how we look at an anxious situation. So I'll pass it over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thank you. And love and blessings. And following this story, Kevin's going to give us a guidance into the practice. So it's a seamless story in that sense. So the story I'm going to share actually comes from a client of some years ago. And it was also a friend of mine who had come to me because of this underlying anxiety that ran all the way through his life. And he was having a lot of trouble dealing with it because the anxiety, he'd think he'd beaten it and the anxiety would come up again. He'd think he'd beaten it and then it'd come up again. So there was this revolving cycle of anxiety, especially it'd do things like arise in the middle of the night and then he couldn't get back to sleep, or he'd wake up after a dream and he'd feel like the day started off terribly, or he'd been at lunchtime at work and then the same things would come up. And there were anxieties about simple, usually, his physical health, his relationships, his money, all of that kind of thing. So the underlying thing was that the anxiety would crop up and he didn't seem or feel as if he had the resources to deal with it. So I asked him about, was there any time in his life when he felt he had the resources to deal with anxiety, or was there a time in his life that he could point to where he felt relatively anxiety free? And he said, well, there was only one period in his life that he could actually remember. And that was a time when he used to go out on his dad's boat, and just the hum and the kind of feeling of the ocean and the hum of the engine and this beautiful open sky, he sort of felt like those were times that he remembered extremely fondly. And it obviously, as he was relating it, was really touching his heart, and you could even feel. So I asked him just when he was relating this story to me whether there was any anxiety there, whether he could find any. He said, well, no, obviously not, because, and it seemed really obvious to him that he wouldn't find anxiety in that situation because he said it was so calm. And so I asked him if I could just guide him. So this was in the early days when I was guiding people into this, almost using neuro-linguistic programming to help them anchor by reflecting on something and then developing some insight through it, just as we do in our raising a vibration program. So I asked him to go back to that time, and he could really easily evoke that memory. It was obviously quite deep in him. So I asked him to evoke the memory, and then I asked him to bring it up and brighten that, use his resources, his senses, to actually stabilize that as much as possible. So I asked him to brighten the scene. It's still something I customarily do today. They help people brighten the scene, make the sounds of the ocean very bright, very clear, make the sense of him sitting in the boat with his dad, that sense of the boat humming along, really vibrant, so that it was very clear. And he said, yeah, he could do all that. And so I then asked him could he bring up anxiety, in the boat, like so that the boat in the ocean, kind of the anxiety was present. He said, well, it was a bit difficult because when the boat was humming and the sky was bright, it was really difficult to do that. And that was his first insight. He suddenly said, oh, actually, it is quite difficult to do that. I said, great. So I said, just actually even make an effort. Try to bring up anxiety. Now, at this point, of course, he hadn't realized he was actually trying to do the very thing that he'd said had been dogging him for so long. So it was starting to shine a little light on just the whole process of anxiety for him. And so he managed to bring up anxiety, and I don't know what it was about. It was just something that had happened in his work. And I said, okay, well, so you're in the boat. I said, why don't you just imagine the anxiety sort of popping up in the boat there, kind of like another passenger in the boat. He said, oh yeah, I can do that. And I said, what does it feel like? He said, well, it's kind of funny, right? Because the anxiety's passenger. And I said, what do you think the anxiety would feel like? And he said, well, probably feel like I do. I said, right. I said, why don't you just check in with the anxiety? So when he did, he found the anxiety didn't have much grab at all. In fact, it was sitting there in the boat with him, humming along, enjoying the sky and the sound of the ocean. And he found this, it kind of made him laugh. He hadn't realized that if he got anxiety to sit in the boat with him, that it might have a whole different weight to it. So I said, do you realize you're bringing your resource of this, childhood experience that's always been with you? He said, what do you mean it's always been with me? And I said, well, look, just forget about it for a moment. And I said, just see if you can remember that work experience again, some other anxiety. Yeah, he said, yeah, okay. So I did that. And then I said, why don't you just go back to your childhood experience for a moment? Can you bring it up? That feeling? And then I described, using his words, exactly how he described. He said, oh yeah, it's there. I said, well, where's it been? Well, he said, I guess it's been tucked away there somewhere in my subconscious. Yeah, I said, right. But has it ever really gone away? Where has it been? Well, he said, I guess it's in me. And then he went, oh, I see. You mean it's in me? Yeah, I said, right. It's not in me. I'm not the one that's actually eliciting this resource. This is actually a resource in you. This is a felt sense of a place of safety or place of calm, or this opportunity to be really, really at peace with things. I said that. He went, because he didn't practice meditation. He didn't do anything like that. And he said, oh, you mean I can do this whenever I want? Yeah, I said, right. And because I was doing neuro-linguistic program, I said, yeah, why don't you anchor it in some way, either with a, like we do, either with a word or an image, or even use your thumb and forefinger to anchor it. And so he liked this idea of physically anchoring it. And then I just got him to bring it up again. And then, like our conscious moments, I just said to him, first thing when you get up in the morning, last thing before you go to bed at night, when you get about to drive your car, when you're going into work, or even, when you're going to go into a meeting, when you're going to feel anxious, because you know that you don't like your boss or whoever it is, just bring up that moment. Just be in the boat and chug along. And so he said he tried it, and he tried this for a week. And after a week, it became sort of more a trait. It became more tending towards something that he was able to just feel into fairly consciously, easily, almost at a snap of it. The moment he realized that the anxiety was coming up, he could bring it into the boat, or he could bring that feeling of being in the open ocean, being that lovely calm space. He could bring that to anxiety. So it was really lovely, very beautiful but simple story, the way somebody can bring their resources into it, the resources they've already got that they probably never realized or never thought consciously about, bringing it to their anxiety in that way, and then develop some insight to it. So that hopefully will lead right into this beautiful guidance that you're going to give, Kevin, because it was such a lovely, really poignant story, because it made such a difference. to him in his life.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. So yeah, it's really highlights the point about perception, that it's really about this perception of the resources we have versus our perception of the situation we're facing. So with that story in mind about bringing resources to an anxious situation, let's go through a simple inner practice with something that you feel anxious about these days or right now. So if you will, just call to mind some situation that you feel some anxiety about right now or these days. And once you have that in mind, just sit comfortably upright, rest your feet flat on the ground, rest your hands, palms cupped in your lap, and lightly close your eyes. And we'll just take a moment to check in inside and just notice the present inner state of your body. And take a couple slow, deep breaths, noticing the moment you begin to inhale, following your in-breath until you naturally pause, noticing the moment you begin to exhale, and following your out-breath until you naturally pause. And simply enjoy the present moment sensations of breathing, this gentle rhythm, this calm background. And as you're settled in to this nice, easy rhythm, this effortless, relaxed flow of your breath, call to mind the situation in which you feel anxious now. So call it to mind as a curious observer of this situation. So you're looking at this situation with curiosity, with openness, rather than being it, rather than being overwhelmed or caught up in it. You're looking at it. You're simply witnessing it. Now, what's the worst case scenario that you're imagining about this situation that makes you feel anxious? And as you observe that worst case scenario, just ask yourself, how likely is it that that will happen? How likely is it? And is it possible that you're overestimating how likely it is to happen or how big a deal it would be? Is that possible that you're overestimating the challenge? And now, if something like that did happen, what resources could you call upon to handle it? What could you do about it? If that did happen, how could you handle it? And is it possible that you actually have more resources than you previously thought you had to handle this situation? Is it possible you have more options to handle this well? Now, continuing to observe this situation, what's the current status? What is actually happening right now in this situation? So, not what you imagine could happen, but what is actually happening right now? What's the current status of this situation? And given what is actually happening right now, what can you do about it right now? What options do you have right now in this situation? What resources do you currently have to handle this situation? And what resources could you call upon to help you in this situation? So, is it possible you have a lot more resources and a lot more options than you previously thought? And now, I want you to imagine being in this situation, having everything you need to handle it well, and taking effective action. So put yourself right in the middle of that situation with everything you need and watch the situation unfold with you handling it effectively. Perhaps life even offers you resources you didn't even imagine were possible. Notice what it feels like when you receive those resources and you see how it all works out. So now take a snapshot image of you in that situation and everything resolving and you handling it well. Notice how you feel. And give that scenario in which you handle this situation well and it all works out a name. Now very slowly open your eyes. And take in the present space where you are now. And with your eyes open, call to mind that image of everything working out, you having what you need, and how that feels. Together with the name that you've labeled that successful resolution. And just record that in your body, heart, and mind. So you can remember it and return to it when situations like this arise. Thank you all for your practice. Bye for now.
Thank you, Kevin. That was beautiful.